everyone, and welcome to the world's most famous podcast. I'm your hostess, Jacqueline Maddison. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Wayne Lee, and Wayne is a dual professor at Stanford and Georgia Tech, and his design block transforms communities through empathy. He also has a new book coming out, which we're going to learn more about. Formerly at IDEO, he redefines design thinking. So join us today for an insightful talk with this professional. Let's welcome Wayne Lee to the show. Please excuse a short interruption from one of our sponsors. The watch that speaks power. Engineered for men who lead with strength and style. Zarbamba watches offer bold aesthetics and cutting-edge performance for the modern man. Wayne, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's been a very busy day. Just kind of got out of a class and rushed over back to the office. But teaching kids is always fun. So you're riffing off of the students and you're kind of responding real time to queries. So it stresses the improv acting skills, but it's always great to do it.
Well, I'm so glad and honored that you've made some time to be with us today. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Let's dive in. Why don't you begin with telling us sort of what inspired your journey into design thinking?
Yeah. So we can start with inspirations. I'm the son of an immigrant family, right? My mom was a classically trained brush painter from my parents are Taiwanese, and so that's that part of it. And then my dad is a PhD polymer chemistry scientist.
Wow.
So just having them be kind of influences in my life, and have such diverse influences in my life were really important. And so when I first got my very first design, or one of my first design internships or design jobs, it was at IDEO product development. And so their philosophy has always been grounded in what back then what they called user-centered design, and now it's called human-centered design, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so and that kind of really spoke to those different sides of me, where you have a certain technical analytical side, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
how do I analyze this? How do I take it apart? What makes it good? And then on that creative side, which is more improvisational and playful and warm and inviting and just, hey guys, how do we go about doing this? This is going to be fun, and that kind of idea. So that's kind of what inspired that. And so that very first work experience at IDEO kind of started connecting me into these areas, right? And so when I went to go to grad school, right, that same connection brought me in. So that's how that worked.
Yeah, excellent. Was going to be my next question. How did your time at IDEO shape you? But so
Mm.
tell us about Design Block now and what defines the Design Block's community involved framework.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was offered this professorship at Georgia Tech, one of the questions was, well, how are you going to teach, at Georgia Tech, human-centered design? How are you going to teach kind of this design thinking idea? And again,
Right.
teach it across all units, right? Engineering, business, right? Liberal arts, design, right? And so my prompt at that point was to say, well, listen, human-centered design is always reflective of the community it's in.
Mm.
So one outreach, like what we want to be good stewards of our neighborhood, of where we are, and we're in central Atlanta, right? And so
Yeah.
part of that was engagement with the historic Hunter Hills neighborhood that was just west of us on campus, right? Part of it is working with local artists. We have local artists that we deal with. So like whether it be a dance troupe that is dancers with disabilities, so a wheelchair dance troupe, like that's called Full Radius, and
Yeah.
we're designing either sets or implements or things that they can use to express themselves through dance.
Right.
How might we do that? So those are those types of things where we engage with the community. We talk to artists and community members that are in and around Atlanta, and it's a collaborative partnership, right? And of course, we involve all majors, right? Even
Right.
in my one class, my senior studio, I can get designers, architects, engineers of all kinds involved, right? And so material scientists, right? And so all of them involved in
Yeah.
working on a community problem. And so Georgia Tech does have a couple avenues in which you can create courses like that. So that's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Now, how do you teach design thinking to executives and then applying it to business?
Yeah, no, that's always a great thing too. So there's a couple different things. One, obviously the audience is a little bit different, so you have to be a little bit more mature about how you deal with it.
We hope.
You would hope, but sometimes it is still fun to have executives play with Play-Doh. Like we have a Play-Doh type of exercise where
Yes.
we make people manipulate clay and as if they're making something. But you're always going to frame it in the style of business. And
Mm.
so in that sense, what you would do, and yes, we do offer executive education through Georgia Tech, right? In GT professional, Georgia Tech professional education, we do have a design thinking course where executives can train the people that report their direct reports. And I have participated on executive education programs through Georgia Tech, right?
Hmm.
Um, but usually we will frame it as, okay, well, leadership. How do you manage and create and promote teams that have diverse thinking, that have both creative and critical skill sets,
Yeah.
that are empathetic, since we talk about design empathy, right? How well do you know your customer? And
Mm.
then on the reverse side, you are going to provide a product or service for them. So what do you, as the business person, what's your point of view on your product? What do you like? What's your brand message? What do you care about that you want that you've identified in your audience, your customers, that they have that same shared value? Can you identify that shared value? If you can rely on it. And so part of that is how well you know your customers and how well do you know your own creative abilities? What can you produce? Right.
Right.
So that goes into leadership, understanding your people, understanding your fabrication ability, your supply base, supply chain, operations, all of it. And then if you use that lens, you're not just saying, well, I could optimize this factory and make it 15% faster. You don't even know why you want to actually produce things faster,
Right.
right? If there's an industrial, like a manufacturing ops person, like industrial engineering or something like that, or an
Mm.
ISY, industrial systems engineering, and they're like, well, I can make it 15%. Do you need to make it 15% faster? Like, let's go backwards a little bit. Is it
Yeah.
just to reduce the cost of the product? If there's still some on the shelves, there's no need to make it 15% faster. You haven't gone through your inventory yet. And so
Right.
part of that is now having, say, a manufacturing engineer talk to your supply chain specialist. Someone's in marketing and operations, or I mean, sorry, someone's in business on the business side, operations. They
Mm.
should talk to the engineer who's actually creating the factory process, the
Right.
industrial systems engineer. So that's part of it, right? Is getting people to start seeing each other, being empathetic with each other, and realizing that everyone's discipline brings something to the table,
Yes.
right? And that's really key.
Yeah, that's incredibly interesting because it's so true. Why make changes or take efforts or initiatives where it's unnecessary or not really priority at the time? So design thinking is about changing your mind or your mind in a way where it's more effective, more efficient in terms of output, productivity, organization, etc. It's really just
Yeah.
teaching your mind to think in a certain way.
Correct. And Jacqueline, I will even build off that. A lot of the things that the engineer, like I first learned about like, total quality management, Six Sigma, basically what we would call engineering optimization techniques, right?
Right.
Right. Back in undergraduate, right? And so, and those type of Kanban lean manufacturing techniques, ultimately, I always ask the question is, what is this factory here for? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what are we trying to do? And the idea,
Right.
well, we make the objects to make money. And so if you're optimizing around something that's not important, so for example, it's like, oh, check it out. I can stock 250 extra parts here. And the factory has all these extra parts inside, right?
Right.
But that's like ultimately you are not making money. In fact, you're hoarding money because you all have these all spare parts that aren't in the hands of customers. So
Uh-huh.
that lean manufacturing technique ultimately, right? It has to look at design thinking and say, why are we here? We're here
Yeah.
to make this product for people and the people buy it. So
Mm.
hoarding extra parts as in your inventory is not a good thing. And so
Right.
lean manufacturing like kind of
Yeah.
also looks at that idea. So I mean, and total quality management did prior to lean manufacturing. So all of those types of things, ultimately, you're right. It's understanding what we call abstraction,
Mm,
right?
yes.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
what someone said, it's what somebody meant behind what they said,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the engineers call that root cause analysis. But at the same time, it's a creative mental exercise.
Yeah.
When you have to imagine why someone might have said something they said to you, that requires empathy and imagination,
Right. And
right?
understanding, I would say,
For
ultimately,
sure.
if it
Yeah.
creates conflict, of course. But
Yeah.
I love the customer-centric mindset and philosophy, and I think that when applied in across the spectrum of circumstances, is crucial for success. I watched an interview the other day of some billionaire, and he was asked, how do you become a billionaire? And he said, well, you must think about how you can solve a billion people's problems. So, and I'm like, that is such a good answer because it's so true.
Really
But
good.
it comes back to that customer centric mindset.
Right.
And I
Right.
love your begging the question continually. Why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? Because it keeps us on point and um, clear on our objective
Right.
in our action plan.
Yeah. And Jacqueline, I would love to build off that. You're so right about that. I mean, the other part of it is like it keeps you humble. It
Mm,
keeps you hungry to learn more. The minute you feel like, oh, I got this, I know everything about this situation, the situation changes, right? And
right.
so ultimately what you're trying, like, the billionaire quote is you're trying to you're trying to solve society's ills. You're
Yeah.
trying to find where are there issues or problems in the culture that we can, like, you want to get rich off something, solve people's problems, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
if you can bring water to arid places, if you can educate where there is no source of education, if
Yes.
though like we talk about designing for social impact or social change, this is the idea is that you use these techniques. If you're not empathetic, you're not open to how you might be able to change that situation. You
Right.
don't see it from their
Exactly.
point of view. And so that's why it's so critical to be empathetic, like you said, and understanding, because ultimately what you're trying to do is improve upon the society. And that's how, in a capitalist society, you would make money because they believe in your solution.
Well, myself, I'm a Christian, and so the teachings of Jesus is the greatest of all will become the servant of all.
That's right.
So to adhere to a servitude mindset of, okay, why are we doing what we're doing, and how is it going to serve the greater good? And the
Yeah.
greater the good, the more of service you can become, and the more valuable you become, whether it's your product, business, or service.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, one of the tenets here at Georgia Tech is to serve the society, right? To try to
Mm,
improve upon technology, create technology that serves society. And so,
that's
service
right.
is one of those pillars at our institute, and
Yeah.
definitely the one that in my life as well as a designer, just knowing that you can drive, like, even if and there's you can help improve upon the environment. You can think
Right.
about the materials you use, and even just deriving joy or pleasure from someone who owns something who are like, wow, this makes me feel so happy to have this, right?
Yes.
So like those types of things always, yeah, they always excite me. They get me up in the morning, and it's why I continue to do that. I mean, I've been designing ever since I was 16, 17. So in that in that type of way, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that's been a lifelong commitment.
Yeah, and it should be. I think there's limitless opportunities for service, and I think when we find them and seize them in our business pursuits, we can live a life of purpose.
Right.
So tell me, you have a book that you're
Yep.
launching or is
Sure.
available now. Tell us about that.
Sure, I'd love to talk about that, Jacqueline. So yes, it launched in it is you can look it up on Amazon, right? So if you type my name, Wayne Lee, last name spelled Li,
Hmm.
and then just type in the title of the book, Design Empathy and Contextual Awareness. It should be the first thing that pops up on Amazon.
Yeah.
It is available. It dropped in London, I think yesterday, August 25th.
Oh,
And will
congratulations.
be thanks. Yeah, and it'll be available in the
Yeah.
United States September 2nd. I mean, you can buy it on ebook now, but if you want a paperback copy of it, it'll drop on in just a couple days, September 2nd. So you'll be able
Excellent.
to buy it off of Amazon. So in it, I'm talking about this exact thing we're talking about, right?
Mm,
Um, if you think about design thinking, and then you start thinking about, well, how do I practice design thinking? A lot of the questions people ask me sometimes is like, okay, Wayne, you were with the Stanford Group and IDEO and the Hasso-Plattner Institute at the time that's the D School was founded and the design thinking kind of philosophy came to the forefront.
yeah.
Um, how do I like I know what it is, but I don't know how to practice it. I don't know how to do it, right? And
Right.
so I said, well, what are those things that you can do day to day in your normal life, in the behaviors that you could have that could help you practice those types of things. So I wrote a proposal to my publisher when they reached out. I can't remember exactly the history, but my understanding is that my understanding from I think from them is that a student had reached out, and for the longest time, I mean, I've taught this class without a textbook, and they're like,
Wow.
"Hey, we're gonna offer you a book deal, right? If you would want to
Mm.
publish a textbook in this situation." So, I told them, well, you have these. I wrote an article in 2014 about design behaviors, how you could practice those things that improve upon your design thinking and your design thinking skill sets. Part of that is mindset, right? Like, so we talk
Mm.
about, and in that book, we talk about like the neuroscience. Like, everyone has the capacity to be creative. I always get that. It's like, I'm not
Yeah.
creative. I can't be creative. No, no, no. You actually have the neural network in your brain
Right.
that makes you creative, right? So
Mm.
what you have to do is practice it. And whether through schooling or whatever, you haven't had the opportunity to practice as much as, say, STEM fields. And
Right.
so part of that it was to say, how do you get more playful? How do you get more improvisational? How do you,
Yeah.
how do you riff off of people and understand where they're coming from and then utilize that to create and be inspired to generate new ideas? So there's that creative mindset. There's that
Mm.
empathetic mindset, which we call about design empathy. And so
Right.
that means like how do you put yourself in someone else's places, right? I haven't need to imagine myself in their shoes. What
Mm.
factors drive their mentality, their perspective? And so that's method acting. There's method acting skill sets that I talk
Right.
about. I
Yep.
talk about design, method acting for design. And so those are types of that first set of where this book comes from is one establishing the neuroscience. Everyone's creative, everyone's critical, everyone's empathetic. And
Right.
so these are these mindsets, these parts of the brain that we all have and can cultivate. And
Yeah.
then it's into the first two, which is design empathy and contextual awareness. So
Hmm.
how do you relate to someone? How do you imagine yourself in their position? How do you imagine what forces may drive how they came to that position? And then from a business standpoint, context, right? Like we don't all use products exactly in the same way,
Yeah.
right? It depends on context. So, if you're at your desk swiping through your phone, that's one thing. If you are riding the bus one-handed swiping through your phone, that's
Right.
another thing, right?
Yeah.
So the context in which you use it, the supply chain and base in which you are creating, the industry in which you are in, all of those things matter and apply to something if you're ever going to try to release it to production.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's seems like a much more conscientious approach to anything that you're attempting to create or build, and in that way, you're more self-aware. And because I think a lot of people go blindly into starting
Yeah,
businesses, et cetera,
that's right.
and that old saying, if you fail to plan, plan to fail, right? But with this design thinking, that's avoiding that in seemingly every way possible by being checking all the boxes, so to speak,
Yeah,
and making sure you're covering all the bases in advance. You
right.
know, to prepare for and avoid failure,
Yeah,
challenges,
right.
obstacles. You know.
Yeah, I mean, and what I would say to that, Jacqueline, is like, let's say like in this situation, it's also about being kind of responsive, right?
Yeah.
If you say, okay, I'm going to go through this process, but I'm going to go through this process blindly, and I'm going to rote follow it. I'm going to check every single box, and as long as I check every single box, I will win. Well, right, what happens when something, like you said, an obstacle or a challenge happens? How do you pivot?
Right.
How do you
Yes.
switch? And
Mm.
so part of what I'm describing is if you understand like you have this empathy or empathetic mindset, you have this creative mindset and this critical mindset. All right, now and like you said, you plan your business. You try to understand, okay, um, if you're in a startup, I'm going to pitch for money in 2 years, or my current funding runs out in 2 years. I've got a burn rate of this. I'm going to need
Mhm.
more money at this point, and you work yourself backwards. You say, okay, well, that means I need to have this many products in this many hands, making this much profit margin by this point in time, and you work backwards,
Right.
right? And so at a certain point, let's say you run an obstacle, your first trial with your customers goes completely haywire. You got a prototype, you get some customer feedback. They're like, we hate this.
Yeah.
Now what? Right? Like, you're
All
like,
right.
you
Wasn't expecting that.
wasn't expecting that, right? Like, hey, I thought our
Now
marketing
what?
agent said that. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And so now what do you do? So
Mm.
now you actually have to sense and respond to the situation. You can't blindly follow a checklist in that sense, but what you can do is like, okay, well, did we miss it with customers? What
Mm.
was the issue here? And like you said, you're being self-aware. What makes designers good at their job is that they are so minute, they are so conscientiously aware
Yes.
of what kind of mindset they are in. They're able to pivot. So if you go, oh well, we missed it with customers. Let's switch into empathy mode. Let's understand what their perspective is, and let's go back and talk with them and understand what did we miss. And then now let's pivot to a creativity mode. Once we understand what we missed, they said they wanted an X, but only X in that situation, and we thought they wanted X for every situation. Well, it turns out that situation is not actually that important.
Mm.
Well, really, the use cases on the bus, and we thought they were going to use it on the toilet, for example, right? And
Yeah.
you're like, nope, that was wrong. So now you have to get creative. You have to switch into creative mode and go, okay, well, I now do need to express different types of solutions, ones that I did not think of before. So now, how do I switch mindsets and become creative? And
Mm.
so, your ideas about being able to kind of pivot, switch mindsets, get your team to switch mindsets
Right.
is probably going to help you sense and respond. Ultimately, you are going to walk through a methodology, like you said, a process.
Yeah.
But part of it is making the process your own and not blindly following a checklist, right?
Yes. Hmm. And adaptivity, really, but in as, with the contextual awareness thing, it's just being more in touch with on a deeper level of your business, its operations, its purpose, and its application. It's not just surface level, et cetera. It's quite fascinating, actually, what you're teaching.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of businesses can highly benefit from applying it to their companies if they haven't
Yeah.
already. So tell
Yeah.
me, how has design thinking evolved since
Yeah.
IDEO?
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, yeah, this is always a very hot topic, right? I mean, I think,
Mm,
you know, on the one hand, I think since that particular time, right, I think about the D School or the Hasselplaner Institute was probably founded around, I want to say, my memory is starting to fail a little bit, but I want to say circa around 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. I
mhm.
mean, obviously it's spread, and different practitioners have started utilizing it for different purposes, right? So
Yeah,
you might see more nonprofits have moved it into designing for social impact, designing for social good.
right,
And so nonprofits who are not there to make money, but are there to actually optimize around what change in society you create for the money that you get from
right.
your operating budget. So like you'll see that people have adjusted it or maybe shifted it to do different things, right? Based on the context within which they're creating. So
Yeah,
I'm very heartened by that. I think within companies, right, you might see some people will use design thinking, in their more so in their messaging. Like how might we look at our advertising? How might we look at our marketing structure? How might we understand
right.
our customers' requirements? And so they might still have more of a tradition, like especially the larger companies, may still find more traditional processes
Mm,
towards their manufacturing. They may lean more into Six Sigma and Lean, but at
right,
the same time, they're using on the front end those design thinking agile processes to understand what their customers want, right?
right.
So I think every company is going to try to take the learnings and teachings design thinking and apply it to their situation,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
But I
and
definitely do see social impact much more, and I'm actually very heartened by that. I really appreciate that. I see more co-design, more participatory design. Like bring your customer in, let them help you make the thing, right? So that's
right.
I've seen a lot more of that as well, which actually is quite exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then with the advent of social media and AI, I think, designing their marketing strategies, et cetera, in such a way to target their audience, but that's a whole nother beast of its own, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but it's the same. You've got to be customer centric and create your content to reach
Sure.
your customers where they're at and give them what they're looking for.
Yeah. Ultimately, listen, I mean, I think it was an interesting one. I think I was watching there was a computer scientist at the D school was talking about the use of AI and they say don't look at the AI as a tool, look at it as a partner, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
part of that is to say, you know, ultimately you're exactly right, Jacqueline. The creativity you bring, the framing you bring to the problem, how you see the customer utilizing the product, where the customer, what the customer's mentality as they use the product. There is no way that AI is going to be able to do that,
Right.
right? A large language model is not going to understand necessarily that subtlety. But
Mm.
what they will understand maybe what
Or the
everyone already knows.
emotionality, but
Yeah, the
go on.
emotionality of it,
Yeah.
the framing of it. What they will be able to tell you about what might be, if you ask ChatGPT, tell me what the safety concerns might be for this product. They'll be able to troll the internet like, oh, here's every single safety standard ever written. And now you've
Yeah.
got that, right? So
Yeah.
as a partner, you can utilize that and have a conversation with it to illuminate the things maybe you didn't know.
Right.
But at the same time, what you bring to it, your creativity, ultimately, that's what you bring as a teammate. The AI will not be able to bring that with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like God given. That's something you can't create. That was inborn, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, how do you balance academia with industry?
Yeah. Well, it's always tricky.
Mm,
So I mean the plus side is my professorship, right? I do have the summers off, right?
mm.
So and I
No,
do have
that's great.
that's always good.
Yeah.
The other part, of course, is try to incorporate them in your work. So yes, I have the design block here. You consider that like a lab
Mm,
at Georgia Tech, right? So the lab
uh-huh.
is was funded by a private donor, and I use the lab to have these type of teaching experiences or executive education or workshops, and then that brings in a certain amount of money that brings into the operating budget.
Right.
But then, the other one is I'm a car designer. I work for Ford and Volkswagen. I help design automobiles for a living, right? So
Oh, how
yeah,
fantastic.
well, that was the fun part. I mean, another life, right? So
Well,
like,
I can already tell your mind is absolutely incredible. Like you have a
uh,
fascinating mind. I can
I
just tell, yeah.
all shots. Thanks, Jacqueline. I mean,
Yes.
I would appreciate that, Jacqueline. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, like, listen, yeah, I have a background I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I have a degree in fine arts, right? I've got,
Wow.
so like, but yeah, I mean, the previous life, I was a car designer for Ford Motor Company, worked in a studio, draw the car, help scrape the clay, all that stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
but that's where it is. Again, that background I said before, having a mom that was an artist, having a dad that was a scientist,
Yeah.
really helped shape that. But back to, back to your point about that is if so for car design, like I have a car design lab. So if if and it is sponsored by I won't go into the names of them, but they are sponsored by two automotive companies. So in that sense, um, they can bring those real-time practical problems that I can use as a teaching aid, again, with
Right.
the company's permission,
Mm.
to students. Say, this is a real problem, people. This is design thinking in action. This isn't something in a textbook. This is something the company faces today.
Right.
And then now, if it's like, how might we think about how we might use cars in the future if they drive themselves? There's no steering
Yes.
wheel. What do you touch?
Yes.
Right? So even if it's just something as simple as that, then our lab will ask that question and we'll use design thinking to try to understand that solution. So in that situation during the school year, the 9 months, I try to combine my work with commercial entities through executive education, right? I am working with current clients now. I might have to fly to a different place over fall break or Thanksgiving and do some
Mm.
executive ed. Um, but then also bring them into the lab, do the research, present it as a corporate project for students. And that's over the 9 months. And then of course I have my own design consultancy. So those 3 months in the summer, I can then put clients directly in there and work directly with companies at that point.
Oh, that's fantastic. That was my next question. So, can
Yeah.
someone or a company hire you? And if so, how do they get in touch? Do you have a
Yeah.
website? How do they reach you?
Yeah. So absolutely. So if you want to reach me through the school, I'll do that first because that's an easy one, right? The school, my email for the school is WLI and then the number 78, right? 78 at uh, GATech or Georgia Tech, GATECH.edu. So that's a fine way to do it. If you want to do executive education through the Georgia Tech Professional Education Office, we have executive education that way. If we're going to do it more in, say, a more of a private function, right? And so outside of an academic environment, I have my design firm. You would just look up Wayne Lee Design. Same thing, Wayne Li Design.com, right? So,
Okay.
or if you just type in those three words, it will pop up. So yeah, I have a
Excellent.
Wayne Lee Design firm, and I usually do handle private clients that way.
Excellent. Now, tell me, how do you define a successful design thinking outcome?
Yeah, yeah. And this is always interesting because somebody asked me that. Jacqueline was like, "Well, Wayne, how do you define innovation? Like, innovation is so fuzzy. What's
Mm,
innovation, right? And people always say, well, and they always say, oh, Wayne, 75% of design is incremental. meaning like the product gets slightly better. Or like, hey, we're
Right.
offering it in pink this year. Like, or it's different color sets, right? Oh, we have an
Right.
iPhone in black, but now we have it in blue. Like, it's incremental. So,
Mm.
but what's truly innovative when something disrupts the market, when it
Mm.
obsoletes another product, or like that's usually a sign. That's usually a sign. What I would say is when a product or a service is so resonant with a hidden need, a
Yeah.
need that everyone knew they had, but couldn't tell you to your face what it was.
Wow.
Like you can imagine like the first time the iPhone came out in
Right.
2007. At the time, I was like, I'm fine with my BlackBerry. I'm fine with typing on something with 2 millimeter wide keys.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the iPhone comes out and it's like, oh yeah, you don't need to do that. You just scroll through your whole contact list that you saved from the Mac somewhere, or your iPod, and you just touch their name. You don't need to remember their
Right.
phone number. You don't need to, you just type it. You just touch it. You don't have to actually type on 2 minutes. All of a sudden, everybody's like, whoa, and now BlackBerry doesn't exist,
I
right? And
love
so,
that. So it's
yeah,
like you give them something they didn't know they needed or something that they didn't know they wanted.
right. But
Hmm.
they always had it. Here's the thing. People always say, well, how do you do that? I'm like, well, the techniques I teach you are how to understand what I call, or what's called in the design thinking process, implicit need. People have
Hmm.
needs they can't always articulate to you,
Right.
right? They can't be like, oh, like most people would say, like, I'm a parent, right? I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, right? And you're like, okay, um, and you say, most people have a need to be a good parent. They wish for their children to be great, but they don't go say that out in polite company, right? You
Right.
don't just go out in that dinner party like, oh man, I'm so nervous. I hope I'm a good parent. Like you don't say that to people at a dinner party,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
So that need exists. Everyone knows they have it, but they don't
Yeah.
articulate. It's not in a marketing survey. You don't
Mm-mm.
go, well, how important when you buy Trident gum, how important is it for you to be a good parent? Like people won't put that in, right?
Yeah.
But if you're able to identify that requirement and that
Yeah.
implicit need by empathizing,
Mm.
that usually then, if it is related to that experience, again, people won't tell a marketer, I don't like typing on 2 millimeter keys. They just do it. They do it because
Right.
they've adapted to it,
Yeah.
right? Because they're highly adaptable. Humans are highly adaptable. So now you go, okay, well, I would, really what I prefer is just to, and I won't do it because my phone will go off. We'll be like, hey, Blanky, call my wife, and then
Yeah.
it'll do it, right? And so
Right.
like that's how I want to interact with it, right? People won't
Mm.
tell you, yes, I would love to have voice articulation as a way to use my phone. Like they won't say that.
Right.
So like you said, if you find that human need that's always been there, it's always been there, but humans who couldn't articulate it to you because it was implicit, they were unaware of it. It was
Yeah.
hidden, and you
Brilliant.
capitalize on it.
Mm.
You just destroy every other product on the planet
Yeah,
in that industry.
absolutely. So what do you think the future of design thinking is for
Wow.
us, you know?
Well,
5,
this is
10, 15, 25 years from now in terms of mindset?
yeah, this is what's wonderful about it. It is an amazing time to be a designer now.
Mm.
It is an amazing time to be a designer now. If you think about the advent of where we go with AI, big data,
Right.
everything being online, everything being connected, the need to be creative, the need to serve human requirements will always be there
Right.
because the culture evolves, human needs change, but at the same time, there is some amount of timelessness to where these needs are. And
Right.
so it won't be able to be necessarily captured. However, if you can imagine assembling a team of the smartest people, right? Your AI avatar 15 years from now, you'll have
Right.
an AI avatar who could function like a psychologist, an AI avatar who might function as every single safety standards regulatory body ever made. And
Mm.
you would say, hey, teammate, I'm thinking about creating this new thing. There's this new thing for children to use their bodies in a way that expresses um, that expresses themselves. It's a new
Right.
style of dance. It's a new style of dance therapeutic. It helps solve anxiety.
Right.
How would I? And then you ask that team, how would I go about that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They will be able to. You'll be able to improvise with them, riff off them, and then one more person will be like the visual creator. You're like, hey, visual creator, I'm thinking an object that like a leotard or a dance suit that has sensors on it that can now help monitor their health, but at the same time monitor their body movements and teach them to dance in a way that makes them happier.
Right.
Can you draw that for me? And it
Mm.
does it.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you've got all these different people helping to feed your creative process and inspire you. You will ultimately still have to walk through that process, engage with real the machine learning, the smart chatbot will not be able to still engage with that child who wants to dance. You still
Right.
have to do it,
Yeah.
right? But then, and then your cues, your ability to relate human to human with someone will help drive and make those teammates smarter, right? So it will be an amazing way to see how AI and how creative output changes over time. But at the same time, it's still going to require your empathy, your ability to understand the situation and the person that will still make that designer so critical to the process.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think, God sent us all here to learn and to grow, right?
Hmm.
And I think as we evolve and become more progressive in our design thinking,
Yeah.
in our pursuits of servitude to the greater good, and like as you said, utilizing the tools, the technological advancements as our quote unquote partners, to gain momentum in these efforts. I
Yeah.
mean, it'll be a whole new world that we're venturing into if we, I think, really cling to the design thinking philosophy and apply it, because I think it's so intentional,
Yeah.
and that I think is a critical element to actually being really effective, in change, bringing
Yeah.
real change. I think it's, again, you are absolutely fascinating. Please tell us again the name of the book. This has been so eye-opening for me. I'm so glad you spent some time with us today. Again, tell us the name of your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's my pleasure, Jacqueline. And the same thing. I mean, I truly do am resonant with what you say about, your Christian values of just saying, hey, we're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to serve others. If
Yeah.
all of us could have those types of values, I mean, for Christianity, but regardless of your faith, right? If
Yeah.
you showed a different faith as well,
Right.
you're going to improve upon society if everyone were to believe in that, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's a heart
um,
posture, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's a growth mindset, heart posture,
Yeah,
service mentality.
that's
And I
right.
love that idea. I just love that idea.
Yeah,
So,
likewise.
yeah, as far as the book, yes, again, if you guys go on Amazon, it drops in paperback September 2nd. It is going the name of the book. You can type in my name, Wayne Lee, last name spelled Li, and the title is Design Empathy
Hmm.
and Contextual Awareness. And so that's two of the five design behaviors that I kind of talk about in that book. And the other three would be creativity, craftsmanship, or rapid prototyping, and sustainability. So if you think of like how you might cultivate those behaviors, and that's covered a little bit in this first book. But absolutely, design empathy, contextual awareness on Amazon. Feel free to look it up.
Oh, I love that. It sounds like there's a book two coming in the future too. So, listeners, be sure to get the book one in the series because obviously Wayne is a wealth of wisdom and knowledge that you can utilize to grow and enhance your business, to progress really mankind and the greater good for all. So, again, your website, WayneLeeDesign.com. We will link it below, and of course, we're featuring you as a business leader. So, listeners, you can go read his article and find all the links there as well. Wayne, it's been such an honor, really. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your incredible wisdom and knowledge. And I wish you all the best with the book, and hopefully we can touch base in the future on book number two.
I would love that, Jacqueline. It was been such a pleasure to talk with you. It's such a wonderful conversation. I do hope we can cross paths again in the future. Thanks a
Yes,
lot.
amen. Have a wonderful week. Bye, Wayne. We'll see you
You
again
too.
soon. Bye.
Bye.